Make time for Dany. Dany jumped out of his bed. Today was the big day. He would finally get to spend some time with Mum, the queen bee, playing in the garden outside of the hive. He washed his face, brushed his teeth, and off he went. I can't wait to spend time with Mum, he thought as he flew through the hive. It's been a while since the two of us played together. Mum is always busy looking after the others and making sure the hive is in order. This made him a little bit sad. He would have loved her to have more free time. Dany arrived at the entrance of the garden. It was a lovely summer day. The sweet scent of the blooming yellow, red, and blue flowers filled his nose. A gentle wind brushed the plants and trees, making them look as if they were dancing. Birds were singing, and worker bees were busy collecting nectar for the honey they'd make in the hive later. He landed on a grass blade and waited for his mum. He waited calmly for a while. Mum must be busy with something. She'll be here soon, he thought. Maybe Mum had arrived, but she was nowhere to be seen. Maybe she is already in the garden somewhere, he thought. I should go and find her. And he flew into the garden. The garden was an incredible place, especially in summer. Everywhere he looked, there was something to see, touch, or smell. If Mum were hiding somewhere here, he'd find her. He looked under a mushroom house, behind a bush, and in the grass near a tree. Nothing. He hovered near some flowers as he realized that Mum was not coming. It made him feel sad. He decided to go back to the hive to look for her. He flew as quickly as he could. She was in the nursery. The place usually looked tidy, but this time it was a mess. One of the babies had tried to fly but had an accident. She crash-landed into a bowl, bumping her head and splattering cocoa all over the walls. The bee doctor was called, and the queen bee looked worried as she waited for the baby to be checked over. Dany flew to her. Mum, I was waiting for you in the garden, he said. His voice was hurt. Mum stopped and looked at him. I am sorry, darling, I couldn't come. You see, one of the babies had an accident, and I needed to stay here with them. But Mum, you promised we'd spend time together. I know, Dany. I am sorry, she said quietly. I wanted to come, but the baby was in trouble. You promised, interrupted Dany. He was upset. I waited for you. But just then, a bee flew to the queen and said something to her quietly. Dany, I need to go now. I need to see the baby. Go outside and play with the others, please. I promise we'll spend time together soon. But, began Dany. Fine, he said finally. Mum hugged him and flew off. Dany stood there quietly for a while before flying towards the exit. He just wanted to play with Mum, but he felt the baby who had the accident was more important than him. There's always something more important, he thought, and felt sad and angry at the same time. It was a lovely day. The sun was out, and the others played with the acorn children. Dany flew there and thought about joining, but he didn't feel like it. He was still upset. He landed on the ground, watched the children for a bit, and decided to return to the garden. Dany flew back to the garden feeling sad. He saw the flowers and the colours, but no longer found them interesting. He got lost in his thoughts as he flew around until he calmed down. He wasn't paying attention to where he was going. Suddenly, he stopped. He realised he didn't know where he was.
Hold on,
he thought.
This place is a maze. I don't know where I am, and it's getting late in the afternoon. I should be getting home,
he said to himself. He wasn't scared. He was sure, being the eldest, he could find his way home easily. And with that, he took off. Dany landed on the ground under a giant flower. He felt tired, and he was quickly losing confidence. He'd been flying around for a while and still hadn't found his way back. He was exhausted and starting to feel scared too. It was getting late. The maze was huge and it was growing dark.
I can't find my way out of the maze. I'm scared,
he thought. He felt like crying.
Hello, Dany. What are you doing out this late?
Said a deep voice from above. Dany looked up and saw a large, colourful caterpillar, Mr. Steve, sitting on a big leaf above him. Mr. Steve was one of the teachers in the school. He was strict, but very nice. Also, he had a gigantic moustache and blue hair and wore large biker goggles.
I don't know how to get home,
he said in a thin voice.
Hey, it's all right,
said Mr. Steve.
You are lucky. Your mother has been looking out for you and asked some of us to help find you. Come on, let's get you back to the hive.
Dany looked at him, feeling relieved. Not only did he like Mr. Steve, but Mum had sent him. Maybe he was important after all. They started walking home.
So, how did you end up here?
Asked Mr. Steve after a while.
I was upset with my mum,
said Dany.
I was supposed to play with the others, but I was upset and I don't know what happened, but I got lost.
You lost track of where you were, didn't you?
Yes,
said Dany in a weak voice.
I see. It's easy to get lost when you're not paying attention to your surroundings. Next time, make sure to stay with the others and tell someone if you leave,
said Mr. Steve seriously.
I will do that, I promise,
said Dany. To be honest, he still felt a bit scared from being lost. They walked in silence for a while.
Why were you upset, if you don't mind me asking?
Said Mr. Steve.
It's all right,
said Dany.
Mum said we'd spend the day together, but she forgot. Again.
Said Mr. Steve.
Are you sure she forgot?
I think so. Mum said a baby had an accident when she tried to fly for the first time. It's always like that. It feels like everything is more important than me. When I was smaller, we spent more time together. I miss her.
He felt relieved saying this out loud. Mr. Steve stopped for a second and looked at Dany seriously.
I know your mum. She loves you with all her heart, he said. But if someone has had an accident, they need help. That's what your mum was doing. Do you know what responsibility means?
No,
said Dany.
Sometimes grown-ups have to do something instead of what they would want to do. It's called responsibility. I am sure she wanted to spend time with you, but the baby needed to be looked after. They are tiny, and when they fly for the first time, they can get into serious trouble. I remember, you were the same.
This made Dany think. Mr. Steve was right. The babies were cute. He liked them very much, but they were not very good at doing anything by themselves, really. They needed a lot of help, and he clipped one of his antennae when he tried to fly the first time. The doctor even had to check him over too.
I understand, said Dany, but I felt so sad that she left me and went to see the baby instead.
He paused for a second.
She really needed to leave, didn't she?
He asked, as he slowly began to understand what responsibility really meant.
Yes,
said Mr. Steve, smiling.
Like you, your mother has always tried to do her best. But sometimes unexpected things happen. Have you thought about helping her, maybe? If you did that, you would get to spend more time with her. And you could talk and maybe play a little. What do you think?
Asked Mr. Steve, thoughtfully. Dany had never thought of this before. It made sense.
Thank you, Mr. Steve, he said. I'll try.
They walked back to the hive in silence, thinking about the conversation they just had.
Thank you for bringing me home,
said Dany, relieved.
No problem. Say hello to your mother for me,
Mr. Steve said. He waited till Dany was safely in the hive before he turned around and walked home. Dany, you are back. Mum was worried and quite a bit cross. You could tell because her eyes were sparkling, but her voice was calm.
I'm sorry, Mum,
said Dany, running to her.
I was upset, flew to the garden and got lost, and Mr. Steve found me and brought me home.
He felt so relieved to see his mum.
I am so sorry.
He started crying. Shh, it's all right. Mum hugged the tiny bee. She was glad her son was safely back home. You're here now. It will be all right. She held him until he calmed down.
Why were you upset?
Asked Mum.
Because I feel like you never have time for me, and that made me angry and sad,
said Dany. Oh, Dany, she said, I didn't mean to make you feel like that. I am sorry. Wish I had more time to spend with you, but I
know, said Dany quickly. You have responsibilities.
Mum stopped, looking surprised. Where did you learn that word?
Mr. Steve taught me. He explained what it means,
said Dany. She looked at him, smiling, and to his surprise, Dany felt proud.
I was thinking, he said after a little while, maybe I could help you more and we could spend time together that way.
I would like that, said Mum quietly and hugged him again. She held on to him for a bit longer.
What happened to the baby?
He asked. She's fine. She only clipped one of her antennae.
Just like I did,
said Dany, feeling happy. Yes, just like you, said Mum, smiling. After a while, they let go of each other. I think you've had more than enough adventure for one day, she said. Go get changed and play with the others before going to sleep.
Yes, Mum.
Dany quickly flew towards the bathroom. He was happy to be home again. Dany washed his face, brushed his teeth, and put on his pajamas. The children were excited and buzzed happily when they saw Dany entering the room. They listened in awe as he told them about his adventure, and then they played a little. Then it was time for the little bees to go to sleep. The Queen put each child into bed, tucked them in, and said goodnight. Good night, Emma.
Oh, good night.
Good night, Marcy.
Good night.
Good night, Lily.
Night, night.
Good night, Adam.
Good night.
Good night, Dany,
Good night, Mum. I love you.
said Dany quietly. I love you too, little one. Mum smiled and left the room. Dany closed his eyes and fell asleep with a big smile on his face.